Okay, welcome to those that are slowly being added into our meeting room now. So good morning to you all. Happy Wednesday. And that looks like everyone. Okay, so we've got a few people going live on cameras again, so it's great to see your faces or no faces. We've just got a view of someone's mirror. But yeah, it's good to see you all again. Okay, so we've got a few people going live on camera. Sorry, I just had something else running in the background then for our YouTube channel, so it was playing over my ears. Ben, just a quick...
shameless plug.
Chat about these.
Yes, look guys, obviously once again, this is part of our free learning series, which we're going to continue. Everything that we do on these free webinars, look, is taster sessions. They're part of a bigger, longer journey. And look, that's really what the Locked In Learning journey does. What it allows us to do is that it allows us to focus on a smaller group of attendees, so 20 people, instead of like on our other webinars where we've had 100 plus people viewing. Really allows Ben and Russell to be able to then kind of take your guys through a journey and actually embed learning and actually begin to train on specific skills, instead of having just being able to give one tool or technique. We can actually give people a real arsenal of tools. So 8 phases to it. Get in touch with us if you do want to get involved with them. Yes. And look, we've got a number of courses from, you can see them on the screen, but the breakdown of how we run them is we do 3 90-minute sessions. We do a 30-minute intro where we give you an intro into the online learning tool we use, which is called Practify. What the tool allows us to do is then chuck out tasks, assignments, pre and post, and actually allows us to give what we call spaced repetition. Basically where we can actually teach people things just at the point of where they're just about to forget it. Really helps with them actually embedding the learning. So once again, look, get in touch if it's something, if you do want to take it one step further than just the free webinars.
Great, thank you very much, Ben. So my first question to you all, in order for us to get started with our Polev, is just the question: who do you consider a good role model in decision making and why? So maybe just say who you think is a good role model, use a little hyphen or a dash, and then say why you think that is. And once you've done those should start to appear on our list here. I'll just make sure it is fully active. Yeah, great. And then those should start appearing as people. All right, great. So father. All right, Winston Churchill, he made some tough decisions, so they're a role model because of the tough decisions. Maybe it's worth us thinking about, yes, they were tough decisions, but what did he do that made them seem like good decisions, even though they were tough? But mother knows best, yeah, definitely. So we could use our parents as good role model decisions. It's the rule. Yeah. All right, Captain Sully, nice. Someone just watched Sully, the program, maybe film. Sorry. So a great manager, people's person, good management skills. Okay, so why do those things help those in decision making? So again, why are they a good role model in decision making, and why do you think that is? So is it just because they get in touch with their people, they reach out to their people in assisting to make the decision? Yeah, we've got entrepreneurs, but again, what is it that makes them good decision makers? Why do we see them as good role models for that reason? So this is something that I'm going to kind of touch upon, because when we ask this question to people, we get some of the responses that we've got here where we don't always see reasoning why they make good decisions. We just see them as good role models for other reasons. So I can see that one person has said, so it's just moved around the screen now, they take responsibility and ownership. So that's a good kind of aspect of why someone can be a good decision maker, because once they've made that decision, the ownership lies with them, and they're not someone to then palm it off to someone else, get someone else in trouble if it's a bad decision, try to worm their way out of it. So taking responsibility and ownership is a great kind of role model behavior. Steve Jobs, so making creativity so simple. So again, that kind of falls back into what we discussed last session about creativity. What kind of decisions did Steve Jobs have to make in order to make those things that he created, those ideas, come to life? So what I'm going to do is just move on from this. I always seem to have a problem moving on from this screen, and just show you what we discussed briefly on Monday. So again, don't worry if you didn't attend the creative problem solving session, you can go back to our YouTube channel and revisit that. So we can put that link on the chat towards the end of the session. But we kind of talked about identifying and investigating problems and what kind of steps can we do. And then we focused a little bit more on idea generation. So what kind of ways can we bring in new ideas that we might not have usually thought of that might give us some inspiration? So what we're going to kind of look at today is more on the implementation side. So we need to imagine that we've come up with some ideas and now we need to make decisions on those. So what's going to help us in understanding which decisions to make? So again, got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. And which of these three do you think is the most effective way of making decisions? So we've got autocratic. So this is where we do decisions alone. We have no consultation from anyone outside of ourselves, and we take full responsibility of that. Consultative is when we have those discussions with other people, so we get other people involved in that decision making, but it's usually only a few people. So maybe it's a trusted friend, colleague, someone who we admire in the workplace or in our family, so if it is our mother or our father. But it tends to be, especially in the workplace, a manager or a supervisor. And this is because sometimes when we're doing consultative decision making, we don't feel like we've got the authority or we're empowered to make those decisions ourselves. So often we consult a manager or a supervisor to kind of feel a little bit more safe. So consultative can be two reasons, because we want someone's input or we want their kind of agreement. And then group decisions is when we include an entire team. We share ownership amongst those teams because they've helped us structure that decision. And that usually helps with motivation and commitment. So whenever you are looking to get your team involved in making a decision, it's really important for you to structure that question or that problem that you have in a way that you're getting their input. So not just saying, this is what I want to do, what do you think? It's going out with the questions in the other order. So what do you think about this problem? What solutions could we have? You might have your expected solutions in the back of your mind, but by getting their input, if someone says something that's similar to what you were thinking, what you can then do is positively reinforce that and go, that's a great kind of solution that we might have there. How do you think we could go about doing that? And then when the team work out a way to do it, although it's something that you thought as well, they're going to take more ownership of that because they feel they came up with that idea. So group decision is always good. So what I'd just like you to quickly do is just throw into the chat function, which of those three methods do you think is the most effective for making decisions? And I'll just kind of have a look in that chat function and see what's popping up. Okay, so Amlinia says group. Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, Bennett's also saying group. All right, Aaliyah, nice. Depends on the problem. That's an excellent point, and that's one of the things that I was looking for. So yes, someone said depends on the situation as well. Oh, we've got some people annotating on the screen there, so just clear those off. So it is effectively all based on your situation. So in the most part, it might be good for us to get a group decision, because having more people motivated and committed to solving that problem is going to help us in the long run. But yes, it is situational, which a few people have said, and Joe's also said depending on the urgency. So time is also a factor, because, you know, if we're stuck in a situation where someone says, we need to make a decision right now, do you have the time to go out and speak to a team or a group of experts in order to do that? Or do you just have to kind of do it alone and take the responsibility that happens? So we've got a few factors that might structure how we make decisions. Time, what type of situation it is. So is it something that we need multiple responsibility? Is it something that we can just kind of take our own responsibility, but maybe seek help from others? So it really does depend on the situation. So now that we've kind of covered that, I'm just going to try and get rid of my chat out in the middle of my screen. What I'm going to do now is break you guys off into a quick discussion yourselves. So this is a scenario that I'm going to present to you, and I am going to make sure that it's available on Polev so that you can see it when I move you out into breakout rooms. But here's the scenario. You're a doctor currently looking after 5 patients. Each patient requires an organ donor to survive. They all have a rare blood type and no patient requires the same organ. Each patient has loving families that are there to support them every day. However, none of those family members are the perfect match for the donor. Another patient is then admitted to your hospital with serious injuries that will require hours of surgery, and there is a minimal guarantee that they will survive that. The new patient is a perfect match for your existing patients, and all their organs are eligible for donation. What do you do? So I'm going to force you into a group discussion now. So let me just get those breakout rooms sorted, where we're going to have maybe 6 or 7 people in each breakout room. So they're all ready to go now. Let's just make sure that everyone is sold. Okay, so when I put you into breakout rooms, if you've not experienced this before, a little pop-up will come up on your screen to say move to breakout room. It will close this window down temporarily, and then it will reopen, and you'll be in a room with 6 or 7 other people. Please do open up your microphone so that you can chat to one another. The last thing I want is one person stuck in a room. If you do experience that and nobody else is speaking to you in the room, everyone's mics are off, cameras are off, there should be an option when you're in the breakout room that just says ask host for assistance. Just click that button and I'll pop into the room, and if nobody else is speaking, I will move you to another room where discussions are happening. Okay, so I'm going to give you around 4 to 5 minutes to have a quick chat about this. I'll visit some of the rooms to see how you're getting on, and I'll make sure that this scenario is available on Poll Everywhere. So that should now be visible on your phones or on your extra tab that you've opened. I'm just making sure it is. Slowly, slowly. Okay, that should be visible now. Okay, so I'm going to pop you into those breakout rooms, and I want you to have a discussion and think about what you could potentially do in order to make the best decision possible here. Okay, a couple of seconds and everyone will be back. Okay, excellent. We now should have everyone back in the room now, so welcome all. You will be muted as you return back into the room, so just in case you were wanting to say anything, you will be muted. But I do want to take this opportunity now just to ask you what helped you, hindered you in making a decision, and what was your decision? So anyone can open up their mics and tell me about that.
Hi there. Hi, it's Pooja. Yeah, it's quite a difficult decision, right? So it's life and death. So some of the decision making is based on how old was this particular patient.
Oh, right, okay.
How old was they? What was the basis of their injuries? Are they really, really critical that they can't be saved even with minimal invasion? I mean, even doctors, their whole ethos of being a doctor is that they save lives.
Yes.
So from a professional perspective and from moral obligation, it's a very difficult decision to be made. So I know I had joined the group quite late, but some of the conversations there were, well, initially we'd ask the patient, but the patient's probably unconscious, right? Is then to ask the pet family as to what their decision would be and if they'll be willing to donate those organs.
Okay.
But initially it's assessing the age of that patient, the kind of injury sustained, and the chances of survival, even with minimal interception by the doctors.
Okay.
So there wasn't any kind of decision made in the end, but we were looking at all the variables that were involved in that decision process.
Sure. Thank you very much, Pooja. I know you had a bit of trouble at the start, so we had to move you around to get you into a room, but I'm glad that you managed to have a discussion with some people, and it sounds very interesting that you're considering, well, we still need more information and we need to understand some of the other details and facts of that case. So that's an interesting point. And then kind of just bringing about a bit of a solution there, you kind of did say, it's a doctor's prerogative to save lives. So really we should be looking at doing everything we can to save that person's life that has those serious injuries. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Anything that they did?
This is Eugene.
Eugene.
So I would argue that it's not a difficult decision, in the sense that we need to segregate two problems here.
Okay.
And we need to follow a process. Already there is a conflict of interest when you have a doctor that's thinking on an emotional level about 5 kidney patients, to revert then to thinking about someone that's come in with critical injuries.
Okay.
So to begin with, if it should, you'd hope it's a different doctor to begin with, or a surgeon. But if it's not, that doctor has the ethical duty to preserve that individual's life. So if that doctor is behaving in an ethical way and following that decision-making process, I would argue it's a simple decision that you try to preserve that individual's life.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eugene. Yeah, to kind of going straight down the line there of a bit similar to what Pooja said, you have an obligation no matter what. So even if there is some kind of dilemma that was obviously forcefully put on you guys there, to potentially save 5 lives instead of 1, the ultimate decision might be, well, your obligation is to save that person right there now who has serious injuries, regardless of what else is going on in your kind of doctor's remit. So yes, thank you very much, Eugene. All right, so I've got a couple of responses there, so I don't want to use too much time going over this, but the simple fact of that is that I wanted to just try and understand what maybe stopped you from making a decision, and what could have been done differently. So I'm going to open up my PowerPoint again. And this time I'm going to move it so that we have another question. So generally, and in referring back to that question there, that I proposed to you, what barriers do you face when making decisions? So this just doesn't seem to be live again. So there we go. So on your poll everywhere, you should now see what barriers do you face in making good decisions. So even if I pick out some of those points that Eugene and Pooja said then, we're looking at potentially not having all the facts. So if we refer to Pooja, yeah, we don't have all the details of the people. What if that person is a very elderly patient and we're putting them into more distress by operating on them, because that happens as well. We may need to get in touch with that person's family to see what their perspective is. But what also we could do is, similar to what Eugene said, we could have barriers, even though they're not barriers, they're there for a reason, but the moral barrier, the fact that regardless of what you might be doing with 5 other patients and trying to save their lives, your obligation lies with that one right in front of you right now. So the barrier is that you've got to forget those kind of emotions, as Eugene said. So again, just looking at some of those key points that you guys have said, being scared of held accountable, definitely. It's something that's kind of innate within us, where we feel if we take responsibility, what are those consequences going to be? So we will have a look at a step of making a decision that kind of makes us feel a little bit better about taking accountability. Conflict of interest, which, yeah, we definitely discussed. Politics, yeah, especially if it's business politics, corporate policies that kind of restrict us from potentially making decisions. Being fair, that's a very interesting one, because what's fair to one person might not be fair to another. So how do we ultimately be fair when people's perspectives are different? Integrity is a good thing. So yeah, how do we make sure that we are seen as someone who holds value, holds truth, and that we stick to our decisions and we don't constantly try and push it on someone else, or try to make decisions that look the best for us and not for others. So there's some key points. Paralysis by analysis, always a good little concept to use there. So if we overthink decisions too much, maybe we just get in a state of constant revisal, where we're just constantly going through those problems, what potential solutions might be used, what benefits are we going to get from it, and then constantly going round and round in circles without actually jumping in and taking that ownership. And then, yeah, making the wrong decision is also something key, where we are worried that we might not make the right steps. So, okay, so we've got a few key points there. So what I'd like to do now is just ask you another question. And that's going to pop up on your screen any moment. So how can you make sure that your decisions are more effective? What can you do personally to help make those decisions more effective? I'll just make sure that is live. Should be now. Yeah. So what can you do? Just so it, oh, just do it. I'm guessing that was going to say. Just decide, and decide in brackets. Okay. Yeah, just do it with a correction there. Don't rush. Consult. Okay. So we talked about that's one type of decision-making tactic that we can use. So yeah, consultation can be used. Analyze the situation. Okay. Use a risk matrix. Very good. Yeah. So we can use simple risk assessments, whether it just be a red, amber, green. Whether it's low risk green, medium risk amber, and then high risk red, just to give us some form of identification method. Use our past experiences. Excellent. We talked about two heads better than one if we speak to someone else. Hold a vote. Okay, so very much going down the group way of making decisions on that. Eliminate ambiguous elements. Great. So whether you've just said that now or whether you remember it from our creative problem solving, removing anything that isn't helpful to us making a decision. So again, we have to remove those based on our knowledge and our facts rather than our emotions. Check facts again and again. Excellent point, and that's one of the first things that I'm going to go into right now. So let's move through and see how many of those are going to pop up in our key decision making. So here are our key components. So I'm going to go through 5 key components, and then I'm going to give you 4 additional elements that can help us once we've covered these 5. So the first one is facts, as we saw. So check the facts again and again. And the reason this is so important is facts change. So facts don't just stay constant. Once they're a fact, they don't always go that way. There might be some that are quite static. So gravity, for example, is generally always a factor. But then some things do change, you know, at one time or another. We had no kind of concept of how light does fully go through the universe until Einstein came up with his theory. Everyone else just believed that all time was kind of static, and light was a thing that was the constant rather than it moving at different speeds, depending on how we perceive it. So here's a couple of facts that have changed over the last 100 years then, just to give you some idea. So back in 1920, so 100 years ago, the 100-meter world record was actually 10.4 seconds. If we go to today and see what the record is today, it's actually 9.58 seconds, or just 9.6. So nearly a sort of 9% increase in that world record just in the space of 100 years. Now, in terms of the 100-meter record, that's a huge kind of adjustment. And within that 100 years, that record has been beaten continuously. So even every kind of major event, whether it be an Olympics or a World Athletics event, those records are generally being beaten. Some of those records still the same. So I think it's the shot put or hammer throw, which has been in place for around 26 years, but facts do change. Another one, bringing it more kind of close to home. 100 years ago, the tallest building was actually the Woolworth Tower in Manhattan, New York City. It was 241 meters tall. So even from the last building that took over, the height had increased by 13%. So it got 13% bigger than the last tallest building. In the space of 100 years, we've now got the Burj Khalifa, tallest building in the world, 828 meters. So that actually beat the last building, I think it was the Taipei Tower, 62% increase in height. If we actually compare it to the Woolworth building, the Burj Khalifa is actually 240% higher than the Woolworth building. So facts do constantly change. So whoever it was that said, check your facts again and again, brilliant. That's a key component of us making decisions. What we once believed were facts might not be facts moving forwards. The next thing I want you to consider is knowledge. Okay, so knowledge is an interesting one, and we might just say, well, is that not the facts? Well, it's not, because it's also the awareness that we gain from situations as well. So it might be facts, certainly, but it's also experiencing different situations gives us knowledge as well. So we need to consider what prior situations have we been in that might help us make a informed decision right now. Then we've got to think about experience. And again, you might be thinking, well, are these not kind of being the same things now, Ben? You know, knowledge is kind of awareness of situations, but experience is actually using facts and knowledge and being exposed to it in a real life situation. So us actually having to utilize other situations in a new experience is exactly what we need to do. Now, that's not always the case. We can't always just throw ourselves into a real life experience. So that's where role play or scenarios play a part, because if we're put into that scenario, we might then need to think differently. Okay, what do I need to do? So one of the examples that we used on our last session, creative problem solving, was create a disaster. So if a disaster was to happen, how might you think differently? So again, use a role play scenario in order to utilize your knowledge and facts in a new experience. The next one also popped up on our ways to be more effective in making decisions, and that was analysis. We did refer to analysis paralysis by doing it too much, but we need to make sure that we do enough. So analysis is where we consider the examination of all the components or the structure of our problem. So we might need to break things down into smaller pieces and work out how can I assess each one and make sure I'm doing the right analysis, the right kind of understanding of each element. So we need to analyze our problem and make sure that we see what could potentially be the outcome. And the way in which we do that is by making a judgment. So we need to consider all available points to us. What is completely in all of the other 4 sections that we've reviewed and helps us come to what we call a sensible conclusion. And that's about, it's not just about being rational, it's not just about being emotional, it's about taking all those elements into account and see what is the most sensible conclusion that we can reach here for us to bring about a result. So those are the 5 key components that we need to consider when we're making a decision. Once we've looked at those, then there are a number of extra things that might come into play that we need to consider. And this is where things get a little bit more kind of difficult, but let's explain them as best we can. So the first one is information. And information actually comes from the Old French, Middle English, meaning of the formation of the mind. So this is how do we actually create a good understanding of all aspects that we might have covered. So as you can see there on the slide, it's not just the facts, but it could be the experience or the opinion that you or someone else holds. So it's not that they are proven methods, and it might not just be things that have worked in the past. What could you take into account that could just give you extra info. So information is slightly different to facts, because facts are kind of undisputed. You can't go against those. Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world. There's nothing that we can say that's different about that. Information might be something that kind of tells us that things might be different. So maybe there's a new building in progress that might be taller. So how are we trying to get over that 1 kilometer mark? So we're currently 828, but there are a number of companies trying to build a building that is more than 1 kilometer. So information tells us that that fact might not be long standing. It might still take place, and when we might find that that building is never built, or it's they're unable to build something of that height, but at least we've got some information that might tell us differently. Then we need to think about advice, and that's again what some people took into account, where they said, how do we get some guidance or recommendations? The two heads are potentially better than one. So this is important for us getting different perspectives on things. What we see as the way going forwards might not be the same as everyone else. So how do we take that into account? It's a good way of developing your emotional intelligence as well, to understand different people's perspectives before you jump in. Then we've got experimentation. So this is, how do we utilize some of the ideas that we might have created in our problem solving, and how can we weave them into this potential problem or solution that we're thinking of? So we might have gone down one route where we've got one potential solution that we're working on, but is it worthwhile looking at what other solutions we had, and can we adapt our current solution? So experimentation is all about kind of thinking, not everything is always perfect. How do we try out new ideas and methods in order to help us come to the best kind of conclusion? If you think about science, it's not always that someone just goes, all right, if I mix this with this, I'm going to get the perfect solution. We might find that we need to add something else. Think about recipes, for example. You know, you're always tampering with your recipes. You might make one dish and then go, do you know what, that needed a little bit of something else. So you bring something else into that mix. The same is with your decision making. It might not be that it's as clear cut as you think. You might need to take something from somewhere else. And then the last thing, and the reason this is last is because it's probably something that we get the feeling of sometimes, that instinctive feeling, rather than consciously thinking things through, to give us some intuition. And it might just be that gut feeling that tells us we should go with something. We should ideally look at all the facts before jumping in, because our gut might not always be right, and it's always good to have some informed element behind our decision. However, sometimes, again, it was something that someone put on the first question, you just need to jump in sometimes with our barriers, just kind of take that plunge and see what we can do. So those are some extra points that might help us in making that decision, so that we can be a little bit more informed rather than just those first 5. So I'm going to show you a few things that kind of get in our way, and then we're going to put you into groups again for you to use some of these key tips in solving another problem that I have. So in order to make good decisions then, we need to think about some key things. So focus on the most important thing. This might be something that's important to you. It might be a value that you hold, or it might be something within the business. So does it adhere to company values? Maybe you've got core beliefs within your business that you need to adhere to. So are those the things that are important in making this decision? How can you ensure that they are adhered to? You should generally have 1 or 2 things that are at the top of your agenda. How can you make sure that this decision supports those? Don't decide until you're ready. And again, this is very difficult if time is an issue, but is time really as sensitive as what you think it must be? If you don't have all the facts, if you don't have the knowledge, if you haven't been able to kind of get some support from someone else, is it the right thing to do to make that decision? If somebody is pressuring you, what I would suggest is, rather than just saying, I'm not making a decision, give them some reasoning as to why you don't feel comfortable making a decision. So at this moment in time, I don't have X, Y, and Z. Are you comfortable with me making a decision without this level of information? And when they say yes, that kind of relieves and absolves some of that responsibility that you had, because then at least you can say, look, I went to you and I told you I didn't have these 3 pieces of information. You still wanted me to make a decision. So that was a decision that you made for me to make that. So it kind of gets rid of some of that responsibility that we should have had by kind of sharing that with someone else. So if you have to decide, try and see or explain to someone else the reason why you're making the decision without all the facts. Always look for the positives of what might come out of your decision. So what is going to be the good things that are on the back of this decision, but you must also look at some of the negative outcomes as well. What that allows us to do is kind of create a balance and see, does the good outweigh the bad? So always consider those 2 aspects. When we're thinking about looking ahead and thinking about how our decision might play out over time, it really requires us to kind of think, of that future that we don't know. And it's an important factor that came into play around 2 million years ago when our frontal lobe started to develop more than kind of our predecessors. So it actually increased, I can't remember what the percentage was, I think it went up about 18%, our brain size, around 2 million years ago, which then started to allow us to play out situations. So our frontal lobe is all what gives us kind of the thinking, imagination, so that we can see what would something be like. So try to use more of your frontal lobe in seeing how might this decision play out. We can't guarantee that it's going to be correct, but it gives us a good idea to see, all right, what might happen as a result of this. If it is a very complex decision that you have, then try breaking it down into smaller decisions. So what kind of key steps can I make? And we always see this when we're making goals for ourselves, objectives. Breaking it down into smaller pieces allows us to feel like it's easier to control, easier to manage, and that we actually have smaller milestones that give us a sense of completion. So try to turn your big decision into smaller decisions, and that will help you get to the end goal in a safe way. Don't feel you're locked into one solution. Again, unless it is a convergent problem, then we have many solutions available to us. So don't feel bogged down by just one. Do look into alternatives in order to help you make that decision. And then the last thing is get what you need to feel safe. So going back to being ready to decide, make sure that you're in a comfortable position where you've got as much as you can have at this moment in time in order to make a decision. If you do need to speak to someone, get that time, get that input. And then if all else fails, then just make sure that you've spoken to someone else to say, this is what I'm basing my decision on. Do you agree? Do you not agree? And that's kind of giving you that kind of safety net that makes you feel that you've not taken all responsibility, that you've shared an element of it, but do remember that even that single decision still lies with you. So even though someone might have said, yes, I understand that you're only making this decision on this level of information, you're still going to be kind of responsible for one element of that decision. You can't just pass it off and just go, I didn't make this decision, they told me to. It's not always going to be the case. So these are some key tips to help us in making good decisions going forwards. So what that leaves us with now is I'm going to give you a survival activity. So what I'm going to do now is in the in the chat, I'm going to share a document with you. So I want everyone to download this document so that you have it visible for when I put you into your groups. Okay, so that should be available to you now. So it's a survival handout. It's got a situation where you are stranded in the desert, and it gives you a number of options for you to consider. So when I break you out into groups again, I want you to have a discussion about some of those options that you have available. And I'm going to put a ranking system on Poll Everywhere. So what this will do is, in fact, I might be able to show it to you now if it appears on my poll. So if this goes live, it should give you a bit of an idea of what it looks like. So it should show a number of options that you have on your PDF. And what you're able to do is click each one. So if this came up on my Poll Everywhere, where it says establish the crash site as a permanent base camp and use the plane for shelter, I can click on that and I can move it up or down the list. So what I want you to do is, as a team, maybe select one person in the group to go onto Poll Everywhere and say what order they think these are in terms of priority. So what do you think is the most important thing? What's the least important? Now, not all things can be done at the same time. So it's not a case of, all right, what would you do first? What would you do last? It's more of what would you do overall? So what is the thing that you're most likely to do to what you're least likely to do? And then what we'll do is we'll give you a quick overview in about 8 minutes time. Okay, so I'm going to break people out into their breakout rooms. So do download that in the chat now, because once you move out into the breakout rooms, you won't get sight of it. And I'm going to break you out into, I think it was 5 rooms before. Yeah, 5 rooms. Oh no, in fact, let me change that, because there's a few people less now. So I'm going to do it about 4 rooms. Do let me know if nobody else is speaking. So raise your hand or contact the host, and I'll be able to kind of flit you around. So have a look at that PDF document. It has got the 5 key points that I discussed earlier, so that you've got those available as well. And then have someone order in preference on Poll Everywhere, and we'll review those. So we're currently on 10:52, so I'll just give you maybe 7 minutes with a quick minute to go over potential results. So I'll open those rooms now. Do click to go into the breakout room, and make sure you unmic yourself. Okay, thank you for those coming back. We've got about 25 seconds before everyone joins, and hopefully you can see the screen where we have some of the results so far. It's messing up because I'm showing different things. Okay, 10 seconds and all rooms will be back. Excellent. So it looks like everyone is now back in our room. So on the screen now, can you just check, Ben, is that visible to everyone, the results?
Yep, it is.
Great, brilliant. So this is based on whoever submitted answers, and then it's kind of mixed them all in together. So what it seems like most people said is the top thing is to have signals ready for search and rescue, okay? Establish the crash site as a permanent base and keep the group together were our main second choices. Moving down the list was to begin to walk for help. Then build a compound was a bit further down that. Have the strongest member of the group go for help was towards the bottom. And then the last couple were begin walking for help immediately or burn the plane as a signal was kind of last. Okay, so I take no responsibility for the answers here. This is apparently compiled by experts. What they actually said was you should look to begin to walking from the 3rd day. So what we've classed as 4th there would actually be one of the key things. So we should look to move from the site that we are currently at. So even though some of us might think, well, we're always told not to move from where something lands, because of us being in the desert and there's absolutely nothing around, it's more beneficial for us to move and try and find some settlement or something like that, because we don't really have too much in the current area. They actually said that you should look to burn the plane before you look to leave the site, so that it sends a signal, and then whoever sees that signal will then be able to search in the surrounding areas from there. So rather than us have absolutely nowhere to look, we don't know where the plane's gone down, having some form of signal like that. So burning anything rubber, plastic fabrics or anything like that is going to burn for a longer period of time, so it'll keep your signal live. But what you do need to have is what we said at the top there, other signals ready for search and rescue. So anything else that we might need to fire off, flares, anything that can burn for a short period of time, we should take with us as instant signals. So all those should be kept before you look to burn the plane. Anything to do with staying in the compound was actually considered a bad idea. It's where injuries may occur more. Anyone who has illnesses or disease is likely to spread in a small contained area. So anything in a compound in those environments was considered not particularly good. So they're some of the key aspects of what experts potentially said. So we've made a few kind of key elements there. But what I wanted you to kind of utilize is some of the other facts that were there, and more so your own knowledge and experience. So I did hear some good kind of conversations as I was moving between the rooms, especially people kind of saying, you know, you should generally stay where you are, but the resources that we have will run out very soon. And then by that time, if you haven't been found, you should look to move out. So if we have a few days where people can recuperate from the trauma of crashing, so don't do it immediately, have a few days, get some of the information that you have around in your current area, and then look to move the group away as a whole. So that's apparently what the experts say, so don't hold me accountable for it, but it does seem like a potentially good idea. So I just wanted you to utilize some of those tools and put that into practice. So what that means now is just us to go through our survey, our presentation survey. So that should be live now on your poll everywhere, so please do look to complete that. Just let us know what was good, what wasn't, and then anything else that you are hoping to have in the future. If you are enjoying these sessions, then please do have a look at what we've got coming up. Oh, sorry. So we've got 5 dysfunctions of a team. If you're not too familiar with that concept, we will be issuing something out with a bit more detail, but it's essentially what can potentially go wrong in teams and how can you correct them. So our colleague Russell will be going through some of those key concepts of what makes a team dysfunctional and what you can do to potentially alleviate some of those. So it's very good for any of those working in a team, managing a team in their business. Later next week, we'll be doing some presentation skills. So it will be a little bit of a mix of how best to structure your presentations. We'll be throwing in a few techniques about, especially virtual presenting now, what could potentially be the best options for you. After Eid, where we'll be taking a short break, and we'll then be looking at servant leadership on the 1st of June, and then we'll have an expert panel based around sales on the 3rd of June. So if you have anything good going on at the moment within your sales, you're kind of doing well in this difficult time, get in touch with us to see if we could potentially put you on as a panel member just to give some input. If you have any recommendations, do get in touch with us as well so that we can seek out those. Anything else from you, Ben, before we close?
No, just to say thank you to everybody for joining. And look, guys, please feel free to share this. It'll be up on the YouTube with your colleagues for anybody that wasn't able to join us today. And obviously the upcoming webinars that we have, please, 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 we will send out, there should have been an email which went out just before this with the registration link. So please feel free to pass it on to your teams, anybody you feel that could benefit from any of those sessions. And as Ben said, if you are doing very, very well at sales at the moment, or if you have friends that are really hitting it out of the park, please get in touch with us because we are putting together the panel expert as we speak.
Great. All right. Thank you. Well, as always, do stay safe, everyone. You know, keep your distance, but keep social. You know, keep in touch with people. We're a little bit lonely in these times, so do make sure that you reach out to people, contact them via phone, via Zoom, whatever video conferencing you use. Make sure that you keep in contact, but as a priority, stay safe. Thank you very much for attending today.